Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com. And from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a news and entertainment writer at Collider. And I like to think that he's 5,000 years old, at least when it comes to his movie takes. It's Will Ashton.
Okay, I don't know if that's a compliment or if that's a criticism or a...
I could have called you a boomer and left it at that.
Sure. All right. Fair
but I did not.
Sure.
This week we're talking about Black Adam and the absolute state of superhero movies. I'm so excited, but you know what people like about superhero movies?
What is it at this point?
People like, the battles, right? They like the stakes, the conflict, right? It's like one insurmountable force versus another, right?
Yeah.
So, I think then, what is a good representative, of that? Like what is a good, how do we get into something like that in our world? And I thought, of course. It's like Pizza Hut versus Domino's and evaluating which one is more popular.
I don't know what it is about these episodes where we have limited time. You keep bringing up the Pizza Wars, diluting the conversation, and, just trying to spark some animosity. I don't get it.
I mean, I think that it's very relevant to,
okay,
where we're at as a country, as a society. Midterms are coming up. I think, the Pizza Wars are on the ballot.
Republicans versus Democrats, Marvel versus DC,
Coke
pizza,
versus Pepsi.
Yeah, Coke versus Pepsi, Domino's versus Pizza Hut. It's all, common knowledge at this point.
So we want you all to leave a voicemail. What is your favorite?
Oh, boy.
And go to the show notes. You can leave us a voicemail on the Swell app. You don't have to call us like, we're Gen X or something, but let us know why do you think Domino's is better than Pizza Hut? If you have the opposite opinion, you can just send an email to you should not have this opinion podcast at gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or I guess you could send it to our email, cinemaholics@gmail.com, or you could leave a voicemail. I guess I should be somewhat inclusive. But Will, I do want to just one question
Sure.
before we have it out, before we sauce out here.
Sure, sauce it out, yeah.
Which chain do you think is bigger?
Bigger?
Between the two.
You mean like
in
has
2022
more stores nationwide, or like has sold more pizzas?
More stores nationwide.
I'm probably gonna say Pizza Hut.
You're correct.
Yeah.
It is larger. Larger. It's in 26 out of 56 states and territories. It's the largest.
Yeah, because I remember Domino's used to not really be around here. It was only a recent development that they kind of expanded.
Well, of course they didn't. They were scared. They knew that they were coming into the wolf's den, and y'all weren't going to just kind of come after them.
Yeah, they had to prepare themselves accordingly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a ton of Domino's out here in California, but they're little gems in the oasis. I guess they are the oasis in this analogy I just painted. But yeah, there's 6,605 Pizza Hut locations versus 6,571 for Domino's. It's close. Well, it's a thin crust between these two.
So you're saying
not
that,
in terms of taste, though.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like Pizza Hut's sort of waning out, and Domino's is sort of evolving or expanding at this point.
I don't know if that's the case. I have a few YouTube videos saved for my research, so we can keep this. So we could settle this. I just want to put this issue to bed, and I don't think it's going to be that easy, is it?
I don't think it's going to be that easy, no. But I'm excited to see how far it's going to go. Like our Tar review are going to be like, some people were canceled for their actions, and some people were canceled for their opinions on pizza or whatever you have planned for next week.
You get it?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, before we do get into Black Adam, did want to kind of address some of the indie movies in the room.
Okay.
There have been a bunch coming out that we haven't covered yet because we were, either I haven't seen it or you haven't seen it. And I've seen Banshees of Inisherin. I want to talk about it ASAP. You're kind of waiting for it to come to your area. Same thing for Tar, right?
Yeah, there were two screenings for Tar near me. Unfortunately, I couldn't do either screening, and I'm really disappointed because I wanted to see that movie a lot. I'm really excited.
I want to talk to you about that movie pretty badly. And then on top of that, I've been trying to get find a way to watch After Sun and Decision to Leave, because those have been on my list for quite a while. But I've had a very busy time. Hopefully you're going to catch those pretty soon. I don't know if we're going to be able to fit them in on the schedule for the show. But as always, if you have any priorities for us, want to hear us talk about something, even if it's in mini reviews and off topic or something like that, just let us know. Hit us up on the socials or email us, and we will do our best to abide your wishes. Okay. But in the meantime, I know, Will, you've been doing your 30 days of horror. You've been watching lots of fun horror movies. 31 days, excuse me.
Yeah.
And hopefully when because this is our last recording before the end of the month, hopefully next month you could give us a little chat on how this month went, if there's anything to pick out. But you got a week left.
I think we have one more in October, right? There's the 30th and 31st, unless we record next week's episode late, which is not impossible.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm leaning, to be honest.
Yeah. But
keep your ears out for that, though.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Black Adam.
Did you say Whack Adam? Did you say Whack Adam? Yeah.
The Mighty Adam, as he is known in some comic book iterations. Will, do you know anything about Black Adam? Like the character, anything like that?
Well, he is sort of like the primary antagonist for what was once known as Captain Marvel, now known as Shazam, right?
I don't know if he was the primary antagonist.
Or
he is one of the arch nemesis.
Yeah.
I don't know the comics well enough to say for sure if the character is like that. The character's been around for a long time, decades and decades and decades. And he was reinvented, for kind of like the modern Jeff Johns, era. They kind of took him and were like, oh, we should make him into this more of like an anti-hero kind of character who can kind of work with the good guys and everything, work with the Justice Society, which is part of the comic lore. But obviously he's edgier,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was gonna ask if how long have they been sort of like reinventing Black Adam, as you were saying? Like, when did that kind of start with Jeff Johns?
If I recall, I know that they kind of did some stuff with him in the 90s.
Okay.
Very different from kind of where he was at in the 70s and 80s. And then the 2000s, I think, not with New 52, but I think it was in that time period. It might have been New 52, and I'm just blanking. But I think with him and like in DC Rebirth, that's like really more like 2000s. Like,
okay.
All getting into the 20 teens as well. That's my educated guess.
Because I was wondering if the character was kind of being shaped around The Rock, considering that, I don't know if you even remember this, The Rock has been attached.
Not really, because, I mean, they kind of always, he has like the pointy ears and stuff. I get what you're saying of like, maybe they matched like the comics to him in recent years.
I just want to say,
because they know The Rock is happening.
Well, I was going to say that, do you know how long he's been attached to play either Black Adam or Shazam?
Wasn't it like, back in like the early 2000s, back when he was doing like Scorpion King stuff?
A little bit later. I think he was first attached in like 2006, 2007.
Okay, so yeah, like mid 2000s. That tracks.
But I think they first started getting the ball rolling on this in the early 2000s, around the time of Scorpion King you mentioned. But like, even if you just look at 2006, 2007, that is about, at this point, like half my life. He has been attached in some way or another to this project. I feel like that's just sort of insane in and of itself. Like the fact that The Rock at this point has been fighting to make this movie for like 15 years now, right? Like pretty much like half, like almost 2 decades.
And in that time, I mean, the guy has really, he's completely changed in terms of his status and profile. I mean, 2006, Dwayne Johnson, that is the aftermath of Scorpion King, right? And Walking Tall and movies like that, where he's still kind of, transitioning from his WWE career into being an actor, being an action movie, kind of the next Jean-Claude Van Damme. And then, we got all kinds of weird movies with him, right? Like with Escape to Witch Mountain and the Tooth Fairy and stuff, which were
the
like,
Game
let's
Plan.
Make fun of the fact that, Game Plan, it's like 2009 or something. They're kind of like playing up the fact that he's like this big brute guy, but like he's got to babysit a kid, and then that kind of completely vanished seemingly overnight once he started doing the Fast and Furious movies, right? Like once you get to Fast 5.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I mean, the weird thing about The Rock is that, would you say he's more comparable to Jean-Claude Van Damme or Arnold Schwarzenegger at this point?
I think he's an interesting merging. Well, that's the thing. I think when he was doing stuff like Walking Tall, like it was a little bit more Jean-Claude Van Damme, and then they started doing the Schwarzenegger thing with him,
Right.
when they were doing like the family movies.
Well, somewhat. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he has the sort of like larger in life persona, which feels very close to like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the sense that like having this sort of over the top persona, but also having like a goofiness, like a sort of like lack of self-seriousness about it. But the weird thing about The Rock is I feel like he's gotten more and more like self-serious, or like he has allowed himself to have less opportunities to be kind of that goofy screen persona in a way that, you know, this movie is very indicative of that. Like it seems like he's a lot more trying to be kind of like stoic in this movie in a weird way. Like it doesn't feel like, for as much as he's been trying to like champion getting this movie made, it doesn't seem like he's having fun making it, which is, you know, well, this should be his passion project.
He would do kind of self-serious movies like intertwined with his sort of like big like 20 teens
like
rise to
Faster.
superstardom. Like I was thinking Hercules, you know?
Oh yeah, I forgot about Hercules.
Stuff like that, I think, is just a little bit more of like, okay, you know, you can have a little bit of fun, but not too much fun, you know? But yeah, I mean, the vast majority of stuff the guy is in, I mean, we've talked about a lot of Dwayne Johnson movies on this show since 2017. Talked about the Jumanji movies. We've talked about Rampage. We've talked about Jungle Cruise, same director as this film, Black Adam. But I think what's interesting to me is like he's always avoided the superhero play. You know, superhero movies, the biggest game in town. At least, right? You know, depending on what part of the year you're looking at this point, but he's kind of had this movie sort of just like lingering in the ether. I feel like I've been hearing about a Black Adam movie since like 2008, 2009. And I've just always assumed that it's not going to happen, that they're just not going to put it together. But I think they just kind of, through force of will, and by will, I mean Dwayne, like they put this thing out. I think he just had his heart set on being this kind of anti-hero character. And I wonder if part of it too is because he's already played superheroes. He's just played like, you know, non-literal superheroes in all of his movies because he has that sort of like charisma, or he could just like slot right into like a high concept quippy Marvel movie or something, right?
I mean, the Fast and Furious movies are, you know, maybe one step removed from being superhero movies already. They already have basically superpowers in those films. So, you know, why not?
Yeah, his superpower is pissing off Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel is his driving. And, you know, I think that it's just funny because why Black Adam? Why this character? And I kind of like the audaciousness of it. It's like, you know what? I'm going to do this really underutilized, not well known to the mainstream kind of superhero and kind of let my persona fill that character. And I'm actually a little impressed. Let's talk about the movie itself. I mean, he is trying to channel the actual character. He's not trying to just be himself in the movie, which he does a lot because he knows what sells. Like he knows that people see him on the poster and they want a certain angle of The Rock. They want Dwayne Johnson being Moana or Maui, right? They want it to be fun and larger than life and cracking jokes and really, but you know, like when it comes down to it, he's going to get the job done. Like that's what they like about The Rock. In this movie, he's a straight up anti-hero. The story centers around this guy who is, 5,000 years ago, long before we were doing this show, quite a while before. I think we're in a place called Kahndaq, which is like, I think supposed to be like Egypt, but like the DC equivalent of Egypt. So Marvel has like the real locations, but DC has kind of a mix, like mostly fictional cities that are kind of like parallel, right? It's like Gotham is kind of like Detroit, Chicago, New York City. Metropolis is like the other part of New York City, stuff like that. And the Kahndaq, I guess, is supposed to be kind of like Cairo, I guess. I don't know it super well. But the plot here is that this, if you remember Shazam, which I remember Shazam, I like Shazam a good bit, which was kind of the permission movie that kind of allowed for, I think, Black Adam to finally start pre-production in earnest and get going. Because Shazam is like, 2019? That movie was successful. And Black Adam kind of, it borrows from the same thing, right? It's the same way to get superpowers. This guy, it reminds me a little bit of Apocalypse from X-Men, that kind of thing where it's like, oh, it's like this ancient mutant, fighting the current day, but in this case, the Rock is this Egyptian person or Kondak person, whatever you want to say, who is basically like summoned to that same area where the kid in Shazam gets his superpower. So when he says Shazam, he turns into like the champion. It's funny because like the movie has like a lot of intro prologue stuff, like a ton of voiceover, a ton. It's like really, really like rapidly explained.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, off the bat, I was so lost. I was like, I don't. What is this city? Why do I care about the city? Who's talking right now?
I think.
And then now what's going on? What? They're slaves? To who?
I wasn't really that concentrated in figuring out the plot. I just kind of want the movie to happen. Personally, I was kind of just like, all right, let's just see where this goes. Let's just see what happens. I agree with you that like I was kind of thinking that too, where I was just like, for as much as movie is spending the first, like, I want to say 30 minutes just explaining things, like even the dialogue is just characters saying exposition for the first like 5 scenes of this movie. It just felt like, yeah, I'm still not really getting a clear idea of like what's happening. And it did feel very much like the studio forcing itself to be like, you have to explain this. People aren't going to understand what's going on. And, I mean, I did get the sense that that opening scene was probably supposed to be later in the film, and that, it was kind of supposed to have maybe more of like a cold opening with like the kid and the mom early on. But they were like, no, we kind of have to do this stuff earlier so that people understand what's happening, what the stakes are and all this stuff. And
which is like the opposite of Shazam, right? Which Shazam actually has a pretty decent cold opening with the Mark Strong, when he's a kid character. And it's kind of a memorable cold opening because it's kind of grisly. And they don't explain anything there. They just sort of like dump you into this world of like, yeah, magic exists. Here you go. And like, here's his motivation for being the villain of the story. And then we're going to go from there. Here, it's a little bit more opaque, but, sure. The idea is that he was this almighty, powerful Shazam-like champion, but obviously more bent on like revenge. Like, whereas like Shazam is fun, he's a kid being a superhero, like I'm gonna buy beer. This guy Black Adam is a little bit more of like, I'm going to massacre my oppressors. And so that's another thing this movie kind of like brings into its its stew, something that we don't normally see in Dwayne Johnson movies, I suppose, but we do see it in DC stuff from time to time. Is the movie's trying to have like a little bit of like a theme. It's trying to talk a little bit about like imperialism, stuff like that.
I mean, if Shazam is trying to copy the homework of Big, this movie is trying to copy the homework of Terminator 2. I think that would be fair to say, right?
No, you think? I didn't even think of Terminator.
Well, the second one.
At least with Terminator, we actually follow. Yeah, Terminator 2. We follow the kid, John Connor,
right,
a bit, and we get to know him, and we get to care about him. Right. In this movie, this kid just like skateboards into the movie. Like literally, he could have been skateboarding down the aisle and like just kick flipping into the screen for all I cared.
He poochied his way into the movie.
Sure.
Yeah, I know you don't watch The Simpsons, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's a reference to something. Yeah, he just kind of shows up, and I didn't even know that was his mom because I just couldn't. I was like, what? Why are you?
Well,
what's wrong?
They make a point to say, that she is his mother. Like that's what the whole car scene's about. Like him awkwardly like on the car, just like, I'm your mother. You need to go home, study, do your schoolwork, drink your milk.
Know, but there was something about her where I was just like, is she a sister? Like, what? Does she have to just take care of him? Because it just seemed a little bit like she's a very irresponsible mother.
Sure, yeah. I mean, especially, there's a scene in this movie where it's just like, I mean, I would have not made the choice that she made in some of the scenes, but she do her thing.
yeah. She literally puts her son in constant danger. And it's very odd to me, at least. But
yeah, and to be clear, when I say it's copying Terminator 2's homework, I'm not saying it's copying it well. To be sure,
know. I'm well aware.
This movie,
but I just want to make sure the listeners understand.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that, like, I think as far as the kid stuff is concerned, that's what they're trying to replicate or emulate here.
No, yeah, the kid is the surrogate. They're trying to set up this thing because eventually Black Adam comes into the movie, but he doesn't. He doesn't have the pointy ears. What do you expect? Of course, Dwayne Johnson was going to go for that, but okay. He gets resurrected. There's this whole kind of like, it reminded me a lot of Mummy 2017. The like opening. We're going to go to the tomb, and then all this stuff's. We're going to resurrect this thing, and it's going to wreak havoc. our introduction to Black Adam is that, yeah, I mean, he's the Rock. He's this powerful like demigod who can just basically he just mercilessly murders tons of people. So that's how you know he's the anti-hero. It's not because he has challenging worldviews or any sort of like morally gray. I mean, he does. His one moral gray thing is that like he's willing to kill the bad guys. I'm like, okay, that's what you want to be about. All right, let's see where you go with that.
I think that would have been more compelling, or at least a little bit more original, if we hadn't gotten Batman v Superman, where Batman is killing people as well as Superman. So it's just like, I mean, it's not that novel, I feel, at this point for DC characters to kill people. Wonder Woman's killed. I think they've all killed at this point.
Yeah, they sure have. And it happens in the comics too, to an extent. But it's one of those things. It's like you either suspend your disbelief or you don't, and the movie kind of helps you one way or the other with that, or the story, I should say. But this movie does have something kind of similar with BVS, where the antagonizing forces who are kind of battling each other, they don't seem to be that different in terms of like where like the motivation for them to fight, I think, is extremely weak. It was making me think of Captain America: Civil War, where I felt like that movie had just a better sort of like dividing line between all of these superpowered people of like, here's why I'm against you. I don't actually want to hurt you, but like, things might get a little out of control. And I mean, speaking, of course, of the Justice Society characters, which we'll talk about.
Right. I mean, I think the biggest issue that's plagued these DC films is that they're trying really hard to copy Marvel's homework. They don't really do the legwork as much. They just kind of want the same results at the same time without really kind of building it up. And so, yeah, like something like the Justice Society, they have to spend time introducing that, but they also treat it like this is like the third and fourth movie we've had with the Justice Society. And also all the Justice Society stuff takes away from the stuff with the kid and the mom that's supposed to be kind of the emotional core of this film with Black Adam. So it's like, yeah, it's just kind of a messy film.
Yeah, there are only like two emotional cores the movie's kind of pushing. And I think that's like Black Adam and the kid, which is really, really weak. I mean, it's extremely, to me, not very believable. They're trying to do clearly this like Clint Eastwood thing, this Dirty Harry thing that, at one point, like even the director is like, I'll show you the movie.
Dirty Harry or Gran Torino?
I would say Dirty Harry.
Okay.
It was, but I mean, they literally show it. I mean, in Gran Torino, what is that? But
well, they show good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't they? They
do. But I think that they're speaking to, because of course that one scene is straight out of Good Bad. But I think they're speaking to like him being like a Dirty Harry character more so.
I mean, morally gray, anti-hero, someone who can be kind of molded into being good. Like he's a sort of like you said, a sort of baseline neutral killing machine. That's why I think he's like Terminator 2. That's like he's like obviously a force of evil if used wrong, but like this kid kind of compels him to be this weird sort of father figure / good force of upstanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they don't. The thing is that like they don't have a lot of conversations. A lot of their scenes are just like the kid following him around, bugging him. And just being like, blah, blah, blah. Did you hear the exposition at the beginning of the movie? Here's more of it. And he's just like, no, these people don't want.
Yeah. I love that the kid, it seems like he has like an earpiece for the studio. And it's just like, get him a catchphrase. Like, Black Adam, you need a catchphrase. Did you see my skateboard?
I appreciated, the kid's room has all of these sort of like comic book appropriate, renditions of all the characters, and we spent a lot of time where Black Adam is literally destroying, comic accurate representation. I thought that was kind of fun.
This ain't your son's superhero movie.
Sure. But then we eventually get the Justice Society, which is made up of Hawkman, played by Aldous Hodge, and then Pierce Brosnan plays Kent Nelson, or Dr. Fate, and now that's the other emotional core that I was referencing earlier.
Sure.
But we also have a couple other characters here. We have Noah Centineo, Netflix Dreamboat.
Sure. Jump into the
Charlie's
big screen.
Angels,
Oh yeah, he was in that. Yeah, I forgot about
that.
Yeah, I forgot all about that.
he plays a fun character named Atom Smasher, and and then he's kind of like the Ant-Man, and then we have Quintessa Swindell.
Well, you say he's the Ant-Man, but he's kind of like the Ant-Man and like the Spider-Man of the film. Like he's like kind of bumbling and
A
goofy
little
and
bit.
like childlike, boyish.
Ant-Man's kind of bumbling too, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I kind of, in my Letterboxd review, I said that this movie is basically the structure of Avengers 2012. It's the same structure in terms of like the 3 acts and how they kind of interplay with each other. But the only real difference is that Thor and Loki are the same character. They're both kind of Black Adam, and he's just kind of, and then instead of Captain America, we have Doctor Strange. To me, otherwise, like Hawkman's your Iron Man, Nick Fury is your Amanda Waller, who's kind of like getting them together. There's kind of like a Phil Coulson sort of moment in the movie.
Viola Davis literally phoning in her performance. This film.
Zooming in her performance.
Right, zooming in her performance.
I think Noah Centineo too. He literally looks like Mark Ruffalo's son, to be honest. And more of a like science-y person. And we have our like red-haired, sort of like badass, Black Widow character. So yeah, it's hard not to watch this movie and just be like, yeah, you're kind of just aping what Marvel has done. And I said something to you, before we were talking about the movie and everything, where I think with DC, I think you touched on this, but like, what's cool about DC stuff? They've done it before. They've done a lot of it, like with the animated TV shows. It's not the action that I think really gets people. People don't like Batman and, Batman the Animated Series and Young Justice and Justice League and like those shows that a lot of us grew up on. It's not the action. A lot of the times the action was ass. I mean, if you watched it, it was like a lot of the animation and everything was like very blocky. And no, it's all about, in these movies, the sort of the ideas. These characters who are very, they can be sort of dynamic, but they're very static too. Like, I mean, Batman doesn't change that much over the course of like Batman the Animated Series. What's fun about that show is Batman, his stoic character, his unchanging force of nature, constantly conflicting with all these huge, larger than life philosophical questions of like what good and evil and like the limits of him and like what he's willing to do. It's what separates DC from Marvel, I think, right? Because Marvel is more of like, we're going to bring this stuff a little bit more down to earth. It's not going to be so philosophical. It's going to be a little bit more of like, what are the normal everyday struggles of like of everyday people, and how does that factor into like what a superhero is? And that's why I think that these two big superhero comic book worlds have done so well to like coexist, because they really each offer something really unique and profound in their own ways. But DC, we get it so rare. I mean, I'm looking at the DC stuff, and like even the stuff that I like, I'm just it just feels like extra Marvel stuff that's not Marvel, instead of like its own thing. I think the closest we got to something that was really trying, like we got like the Christopher Nolan movies, which seemed to get that. We got I think to some extent Joker, but I think Joker was a little bit more of like a middle school art class version of what I'm talking about. But I don't know. I've been rambling.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, I think they have the potential, and they have at certain points been able to capture that sort of weighted morality that you're referring to. That
Snyder has tried to do it. I'm not giving him enough credit. And I think Justice the Snyder cut Justice League is actually, we talked about it. It approaches, I think, what I'm talking about actually pretty well.
I think so too. And I think watching this movie, which especially at the beginning, very clearly emulates the Snyder style to the point where, in my opinion, it made me miss, like, okay, Snyder had a lot more. Say what you will about the man. Say what you will about him as an artist. Say what you will about his DC movies, but I feel like he had more of an established style that felt central to him. And like every time I watch a Snyder movie, I'm like, okay, this is clearly, for better or for worse, this is a Zack Snyder movie. This movie just feels like a boardroom of executives are all kind of like infighting and trying to decide and compromise like what this movie should be. So it kind of feels like this hodgepodge of different styles and tones and stuff. And yet, weirdly, it's just kind of boring. Like, it's not even like an interesting sort of mess. Like, it just kind of feels very corporate in a way that I feel has been indicative of The Rock style for a while. I feel like he's trying now to make his movies as broadly appealing as possible, kind of sanding the edges off.
He is one of the producers.
Yes. And the weird thing is that, like, he's trying to be reverent to, like, the machismo and the like, heightened violence of the comics with this character, but he's also trying to make something that feels like that fits the style of what superhero movies are now, and like what I think he thinks a broad audience would want from him at this point in his career, and what people want from the genre at this point. And I don't know, it just feels like it's just a lot of conflicting interests that don't really gel together to make an entertaining or even logical film.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too. I was like, this just feels like content, and that's the thing about content. It can be mildly entertaining. I think that some people are going to watch this and, they're going to like parts of it. Some of it's cool. Like, I think some of the action, some of the battle scenes before they kind of wear out their welcome, or
sure.
I think it actually is. There was real tension when a character like Hawkman, who I don't care about, is fighting Black Adam, who I don't care about. Because I'm like, well,
sure,
either of them could die. I'm not actually worried. Like, I actually don't think, because we don't have all these movies and a big universe propping this up, we're meeting these characters for the first time, and they could do whatever they want with them. And there is something kind of interesting about that. Because when you watch like a Marvel movie, when you're watching Spider-Man fight, like Dr. Octopus, I know Spider-Man's going to be okay. He's going to be fine. You know what I mean? I don't really feel like the stakes are that high all the time. But in this movie, I was like, well, I guess there are some stakes.
Yeah. I mean, I do think from an action standpoint, like the opening for Black Adam, like the true opening for Black Adam,
it's a bit of a black opening. Yeah,
yeah, it's a dark. Well, I'm trying to say it's a impressively pretty dark scene as far as like when he's like brought back, from his curse or whatever, and he just annihilates 50 people.
It's kind of grisly. I mean,
right.
it's kind of like with Shazam. We can go back to that. I mean, Mark Strong's character has like that whole boardroom scene where he just mercilessly just wipes people out.
Which is probably the best scene in that movie for me, at least. I mean, I thought that was probably one of the high points. But I mean, that's like enjoyable, I guess. I mean, interesting in a way as far as like, their willingness to be this kind of dark. And obviously, it's really sanded down as far as like the R rating was concerned. Like, I think they had to go through like 4 cuts to make this PG-13. You can kind of tell, like, it's just like paper, like, taping this movie together to be a PG-13 film.
It's a lot of like PS3, maybe PS4 cutscenes, in terms of like the violence and the quality of the special effects and all of that.
Yeah. But I mean, and then, there's like a demon-ish fight towards the end without giving too much away that, I don't know, I was kind of interested in, but emotionally I didn't really feel connected to anything. Like, at most I felt like a superficial sort of like, oh, it's kind of cool, or like, yeah, it's kind of fun. But I mean, I just felt like you said, it just feels like this is all product at this point. For The Rock, I feel like he doesn't really make movies. I think he just kind of makes product. Like, I think he makes stuff that appeals to his brand. I think he knows.
He's a businessman.
Yes, he's a businessman. And I felt that was very apparent when a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, there was a tweet or an Instagram post from him where it was just a picture of him in a boardroom, like the back of his head, and all these people, all these executives are watching this movie, and they said, watching the final cut of Black Adam. And it's like, they're not even watching it in a theater. Like, they're not even watching it in like a surround sound studio or whatever. They're just watching it in a boardroom, like on a projector, and like like in this office. And it's just like, okay, like, if that's how you view this film that's supposed to be screening in IMAX and all this stuff, like, if you don't value the theatrical presentation in the sense of you're watching the final cut of this film, then how do you convince us that it's worth going to the movies during a pandemic to see it?
But literally too, I don't think you've gotten to that episode yet in Mad Men, where there's a very, very similar moment that you're about to witness, but I won't say any more. You need to catch up, Will Ashton, on so we have more Mad Men to record. But anyway, yeah, I kind of like, as I was watching this, I was thinking about like where are we at right now with superhero movies in terms of the people who make them and the people who watch them. I think 2022, 2020, 21, and 2020, big L's for superhero movies broadly. I think that we've gotten some good ones, but I don't think we've gotten, you and I were debating this with our friend Mike Overholtz just yesterday. Like, what was the last great superhero movie? Like, great. And I think your opinion, it was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but that's end of 2018. That's like, 4 years ago now. For me, I don't think there's been a great one. Like, I think there have been good, okay, barely good movies. I think like the Batman, for instance, is like barely good, for me at least.
I thought it was good, but very
for me, for me, the last great one, like the last one that I was just like had me really feeling it, was Avengers Endgame. And we've gotten a lot of superhero movies since then. You know, and I think that for me, like the good superhero stuff has been on the small screen. I've been enjoying more so like The Boys and Invincible, the Amazon stuff, you know. And otherwise, I think that we're in this weird place with these movies where I think producers are really driving like what's getting made with these. And like, I've nothing against producers, generally speaking, but I think that like directors are not bringing the passion to it anymore. And the producers are just kind of like churning this stuff out through the creative that they have. And this is kind of the result, I think. And
yeah,
it's that time. It's we're past the peak, I think.
I mean, for as much as people bemoan the comparison that, you know, superhero movies are new Westerns, it does feel kind of indicative of like how, you know, after a point, like towards like the like 60s, I think like the late 60s, like they started transitioned into like Western TV shows, and that kind of overpopulated that medium, and to the point where like the whole genre like, started to kind of fizzle out of relevance because there's just like an oversaturation of it. It kind of became because there's like not only in films but like on TV there are just so many westerns, and I feel like we're kind of getting to that point with superhero movies now, where it's just like not only are we getting like a ton of superhero movies, you know, basically every other month, if not every month, but now we're just getting all these shows, all these Marvel shows, all these DC shows, all these streaming shows related to or directly adapting comic book characters. And it's just like, I mean, for me at least, I'm just kind of tired of it. I mean, there are good ones that come out, sure, and I haven't really kept up with TV stuff, but I'm sure a lot of that's good to find. And you know, I'm not gonna, you know, say that that's not, you know, worth seeking out, but I'm just kind of getting tired of it personally. And I feel like there's just sort of a tiredness to this movie that, you know, just felt very apparent to me, like not only as a viewer, but just like, I don't know, for as much as much passion as The Rock has put into this, not only as an actor, but as a producer, I just feel like it doesn't really show that passion in a weird way. Like you have a director who has really established himself stylistically and also like kind of making goofy, fun, over the top action movies that, you know, it on paper it could make sense that these two could do something fun with this property, but I don't know, it just didn't really capture that spark, unfortunately.
Well, hey, despite what we're saying, you know, in terms of like you and I not being as enthused about superhero movies as maybe we once were, and I want to be clear real quick too, by the way, that, you know, people hear the whole thing of like the way of the Western, and it's like, it's not saying that superhero movies will stop being made. It's just that Westerns used to be the ubiquitous and premier sort of like movie, you know, it was Westerns and, you know, big musicals. And in the 60s, those kind of slowly went away. And, you know, as we went into a period of more independent, auteur-driven cinema that eventually turned into the blockbuster era. So this stuff just sort of naturally changes. And I think that's all that people have been getting at. It's just like, yeah, superhero movies are going to, you know, they'll always have superhero movies, but they're not going to be the dominant pop cultural force forever. I mean, that's highly unlikely. I mean, how do you, that's not sustainable. I mean, people's tastes change, generations switch hands, and people get tired of things, and, you know, there's diminishing returns and all that. It's just kind of like the natural state of things. But I think people take that as like very offensive. Like, what are you saying? Like, yeah, you're right. They are different from Westerns. Westerns lasted longer. Let's say that. In terms of how huge they were.
Yeah. And they were also, well, never mind. I'm not going to say that.
Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, no. I don't want to get any angry emails.
I mean, this movie's asking for it. It evokes Clint Eastwood so much.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. Yeah. I did see some people knocking the film as far as like, my favorite scene was when they showed the good and the bad and the ugly, because for a brief moment I was watching a good film. I saw someone tweet that.
Because even though we're, you know, we're clearly not that into the movie. I mean, I don't have a strong disdain for this movie or anything. I just think that it's a bit of a nothing, hollow vessel, which, you know, it's fine. It can be that. I think it's certainly an attempt. You know, I'm not going to like bemoan, like the director here, Jean-Michel Serra, who we mentioned earlier, did another film that we've talked about pretty recently. I mean, we did talk about. Did we ever talk about The Commuter actually with him?
I believe so. I mean, I enjoyed The Commuter. I like Nonstop.
I was going to say,
I mean, I enjoy some of his action movies. I think they have a good sort of tongue-in-cheek awareness where like they play it straight enough to where it's not like a lark, but they're willing to be over the top and goofy enough to where you don't have to take it too seriously. And I felt like when he was making those Liam Neeson movies, he kind of cracked the code. And now he's in this.
He did Jungle Cruise with
Right.
with Dwayne Johnson, which is about an immortal person who, goes on this adventure that's highly IP driven, to Black Adam, which Dwayne Johnson plays this immortal person who goes on this adventure that's highly IP driven.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Yeah. I mean,
but no, all that to say, despite our talking down, our dressing down to this movie, as it were, it's doing okay. Box office wise, internationally, it's made 142 million. It's about a $200 million budget. So it's on track to maybe make a little bit of money, maybe break even. Kind of depends on the lasting power of this. We do have Wakanda Forever coming up, which I think is going to kind of switch over the hype, the theater real estate, as it were. But this movie might do fine. That's pretty good for an opening weekend. But there are people who really like this movie. I'm kind of baffled because we don't have to get into the whole thing where people were just like, the people who don't like this movie drink fancy music wine or whatever.
I mean, yeah, you're referring to that Twitter thing, but I did see, I was reading before we started recording, Matt Zoller gave it 3.5 stars.
Well, you know what? I saw some people who, and we're about to play the Rotten Tomatoes game, so it's a good transition to that. But the first wave of reviews reminded me a lot of Lion King 2019. Because I'll never forget. I was in that first wave, and I'd just be like, what are you guys talking about? This movie is garbage. And I remember most of the reviews were just like, oh my gosh, visual delight, splendor for days. And I'm like, yeah, it looks good, but you guys are just kind of fluffing this movie a bit. This is not a good movie. With Black Adam, I saw a lot of early praise for this one, a bit jarringly so. And I'm not going to get on people's case. I'm not their babysitter. I'm not
sure.
I'm not the mom from this movie. Just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, is it at a point now where I think the studios sort of can assume which writers and which publications are probably going to be more favorable on a film? Not to say that they're in the pocket for them or anything. I'm not going to say
they're
anything.
They're not being paid, but they know the people whose opinions they can count on.
Right. I think the people that they can comfortably assume are probably going to be a little bit more generous in their praise of a film like this, even though, especially a film like this that has problems and that, is probably going to be a little bit more checkered in its enthusiasm. I think they can kind of rely on certain people to kind of boost up the initial word of mouth. And I think that's the card they played here, I'm assuming.
Well, from a business perspective, I do think it is the right move. That's how you make money in this business. So, the incentive is clearly there. But, let's get into it. Let's talk about let's do the Rotten Tomatoes game. So I think you said you got spoiled on this, right? So you might know the exact.
Well, I know for sure that The Rock keeps promoting the audience score. So I'll start with that one.
Okay.
Because I think the critic score has probably fluctuated, but I know audience that he was,
by the way, is 5,000 plus verified ratings. That's pretty good for Rotten Tomato standards.
Sure. I know that there's a huge divergence between the critic score and the audience score. The audience score, the last I had heard from the star of this film, is 90%.
And do you think it still is 90%?
I'm going to go, I think it might even be higher. It might even be 92%.
It was 90%. You should have just stayed where you were. Stay in your seat.
Jeez Louise. I don't know. I know that's kind of the thing that The Rock has been championing, is that this is a movie he made for the people.
Of course.
Even though I think he makes movies for himself. But
for the fans, which but he says the biggest fan.
Right. The biggest fan of them all, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
More power to him, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know.
I have nothing against
I don't have anything against him either.
Here.
Right. Yeah. I really don't. I mean, I just wish he made more entertaining movies. I mean, I just wish he made movies that were fun again.
What was the last one you liked?
With him?
Yeah.
Probably Fate of the Furious.
That was a while ago.
Yeah, that was 2018.
I mean, I liked Hobbs and Shaw. I know I will never see
Hobbs and Shaw. That movie sucks. I'm sorry. I know you like that movie.
That's our Pizza Hut Domino's forerunner, isn't it?
I would watch Black Adam 5 times before I rewatch Hobbs and Shaw. That movie, that is way more. Because this movie is also I don't like using this term, but this movie is kind of a vanity project for The Rock. And that movie is especially a vanity project for The Rock.
Our priorities are clear in terms of movies. All right, so then what about the critic score? So you already guessed that you think high divergence,
right?
cited your evidence, but we have 226 reviews counted. I guess you could say, like, what you said, you did see this at one point, but you think it's moved?
I think so. I think it's around 40%. I'm going to say like 42%.
Ooh, it is around 40%, but it's just under. So it's 39%. It's going down.
Okay.
Yeah, I think to what we were saying, that initial wave kind of hyped this movie up a bit, but then, critics got their hands on it, and certainly things changed there. But like you said, I mean, there are people who are going to bat for it. Amy Nicholson,
really?
She's saying, you know what, I this Black Adam, I like what he's up to. I'm into it. Let's look at CineScore though. Well, Ashton, what do you think the cinema score is? Did you get spoiled on this as well?
This way I have not been spoiled on.
Oh, fantastic. All right, let's get your best guess.
B minus?
No, a bit higher. I'm surprised you would guess that low, considering the audience score is where it is. It's B plus.
Well, I don't know. Now, I mean,
B plus isn't great for cinema score, for a superhero cinema score. I think for like good is like A minus, really good is A, and great is A plus. B plus is like, okay, yeah, sure, pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little dubious, I'll say, of the Rotten Tomatoes audience score.
That's
not
clear.
To say that it's entirely false. I'm sure some people are loving this movie. They weren't in my audience, I'll say that much. And they weren't in your audience, it sounded like, because you saw this movie by yourself.
That's right. There was nobody in my theater. Not a single person.
Not a single soul.
Fantastic.
Other than you.
I don't think I've had that kind of experience in a theater since like way before COVID.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating. It was this movie, like a blockbuster.
Well, part of it is because this movie has so many showtimes because they were expecting it. I think that's what it is. I think that like, for matinees and stuff, they're like, oh my gosh, people are going to be coming every minute of the hour. So like, I'm sure that if like they had limited showtimes, it wouldn't have been empty. But
yeah, they kind of shot themselves in the foot there a bit, I guess.
Think so. All right, we'll finish out with Letterboxd and then call it a week. So on Letterboxd.com, we have 57,000 watches, which is not that high for kind of a superhero PG-13 Dwayne Johnson movie. I'm kind of surprised it's that low, which is not that like relatively low, but you get it.
Right.
But yeah, okay. What do you think, Will? 0 to 5?
2.5.
It's a bit higher. The average Letterboxd rating right now is 2.9. So not your week. You weren't that close with any of these. Even the one that you were spoiled on.
Yeah. I don't know. This one's
it's early in the day.
Yeah, it is early in the day. And I don't know. I thought it would be a little bit more inconsistent than I guess it was.
I hear you. I'm looking and, I'm seeing like our friend Charlie originally gave it 3 stars, but then Ryan Oliver, also a friend of the show, gave it 1.5. One of my friends, Diego, gave it 2 stars, and I'm not seeing like Matt Donato gave it 3. I'm not seeing, the only thing I'm seeing higher than 3 is I see 2 3.5s, and one of them's from David White. So,
yeah, I have a few people gave it 3.5 on my Letterboxd.
Oh wait,
you said
I had an older. There are a few more coming in. I have one more 3.5, and I see a 4-star here.
Oh,
so there you go.
Okay, yeah,
there's a couple people who are just like, yeah, you know what? Black Adam. When do we get Black Eve?
Yeah, I didn't realize that David Weigel was. Did you say that he liked the movie already?
Yeah, 3.5 stars.
Yeah, that's surprising to me. I know he's not a movie critic, but that's pretty surprising all the same.
You should follow his Letterboxd. It's fun. He has some wild takes. Oh, I was going to say, if you didn't see it.
Okay. I saw that on my timeline. That's why I was taken aback. I feel like I look like David Weigel right now. I know the listeners don't know what I look like right now, but
yeah. You actually, wow, I've never made that connection, but yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
cool.
For the listeners, if you want a picture, I have a mustache right now because of my Halloween costume. Yeah, and John didn't comment on it, but I'm wearing my Superman shirt, and it was supposed to be a play on the reshoots when he had the mustache, but John didn't notice or comment on it. So there we go.
You're leaning in. I barely see the shirt,
Yeah.
But fair enough. All right. That'll do it for our show. Do we want to do a quick spoiler thing though for a certain cameo or two that happens in the movie? People can
Sure, if you have time.
Have a couple minutes, 2 minutes. If you haven't seen Black Adam, you don't want to be spoiled on what we're about to talk about. You got to get out of here. Press pause and come back later. Okay, so Will, first of all, the Man of Steel thing. Yeah, okay.
Sure, whatever. It's fine.
He shows up in the movie.
Everyone expected it.
Yeah.
Look, I love Superman. I'm wearing a Superman shirt. It was fine.
All right.
Yeah.
Henry Cavill, you're still playing the part. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
Kind of sad, but also I hope
Albeit.
he gets. I hope he gets a really good Superman movie out of this. So
yeah, they played
we'll
they played the original theme, and I was like, "Excuse me."
Right. I mean, the Hans Zimmer theme is great. I mean, say what we will about Man of Steel. That's a great theme.
Why do we need to go John Williams with this? Like, you have it.
Right.
Like, I have the Hans Zimmer's like I think like half the soundtrack on my big movie playlist, my movie soundtrack playlist. So I don't know what we're doing here.
All right.
But
big
also,
cameo.
Though, the bigger cameo. Was not expecting.
Different Henry.
Different Henry. That's true. Henry Winkler shows up as like the original Atom Smasher. I'll admit I don't know much about the Atom Smasher character, but I got Hank Pym vibes, I guess. It's just probably way off. But
no, I think that's exactly what they were thinking.
Okay.
They were like, who could be our Michael Douglas? Henry Winkler.
Which is so funny because you would think it'd be reversed, that like Michael Douglas would be the DC kind of like mentor and Henry Winkler would be more like suited for the Marvel. Right. I love the idea of Henry Winkler in like a comedic superhero kind of movie, you know, especially if he's doing his Barry persona. But anyway, that's all I wanted to get into.
Yeah, I just that was the only cameo because I had known that there was like an end credit cameo. I was like, gee, I wonder who it is. Like even before I was told.
Well, I was kind of like, well, okay,
heard it was Spider-Man. Or Superman.
Why isn't Superman in the movie before this? Like I thought it was weird that the Justice Society is doing their thing. It's like Superman's in this world. Why doesn't he show up? And then he had his cameo in Shazam. I also was kind of curious of like, I wonder why Shazam. You know, they don't even reference. But okay, sure, they don't need to.
I mean, The Rock spends the whole movie quoting, as I said on Letterboxd, the theme song for Scrubs by saying, "I'm no Superman." So I just kind of figured that Superman would come up at some point.
I mean, he does. He's in the posters, and Wonder Woman gets referenced in the comics.
Sure,
the kid has.
Yeah,
sure.
So, yeah,
that's that.
That's it.
We'll see you all in the next one. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Washington.
See you next time.